The crystal spires of New Zephyr gleamed like captured starlight above the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. Ambassador Kethvar stood in the highest tower of the council chamber, watching the morning light dance through the translucent walls. For 300 years, the Zephyrian Republic had been the strongest voice in the Galactic Defense Coalition. Today, they would make a choice that would change everything. "The reports are confirmed," said Defense Minister Zalthek, his crystalline form shimmering as he approached. "The Void Swarm has emerged from dark space. 12 systems have gone silent in the outer rim." Kethvar's light patterns shifted to a worried blue. The Void Swarm was a nightmare from ancient records, silicon-based creatures that devoured entire planets, leaving nothing but empty space behind. No one had seen them for 1,000 years. "How many ships do they have?" Kethvar asked. "Our scouts counted over 5,000 vessels before they were destroyed. The swarm grows larger with every world they consume. They turn the raw materials into more ships, more soldiers." The council chamber filled with the soft harmonic tones of Zephyrian discussion. 50 crystal beings gathered in a circle, their lights pulsing in patterns that showed their emotions. Fear was the dominant color today. Council leader Mordeth raised his voice above the others. "The coalition has called for immediate military support. The Mandari worlds are directly in the swarm's path. They request our protection." A wave of green skepticism rippled through the chamber. The Mandari were gentle creatures from garden worlds. They had never fought a war in their recorded history. Their telepathic abilities made them excellent healers and teachers, but they had no weapons, no warships worthy of the name. "The Mandari territories are over 200 light-years from our borders," said Military Commander Velkan. "Our fleets would be stretched thin, protecting both them and our own worlds." "They are our allies," Kethvar said firmly. "We have trade agreements, cultural exchanges. They have been faithful friends to our people." "Friendship does not win wars," Velkan replied. "The Void Swarm shows no mercy. If we divide our forces, we risk losing everything. Better to create a strong defensive line around our core systems." The debate continued for hours. Charts and tactical displays showed the grim mathematics of interstellar warfare. The Zephyrian Republic had a powerful navy, but it was designed to patrol their own territory and support coalition peacekeeping missions. Fighting the Void Swarm would require every ship they had. "There is another factor to consider," said Intelligence Director Nal Seth, her voice cutting through the discussion. "Our analysis shows the swarm follows mineral-rich paths through space. If they consume the Mandari worlds, their next logical target would be the asteroid fields of the Kepler sector. That would bring them directly toward our outer colonies. All the more reason to stop them at our borders, not waste resources in distant space," Velkan argued. But Nalseth continued. "However, if we allow them to consume the Mandari territories, we gain valuable time. The swarm would spend months processing those worlds. We could use that time to fortify our defenses and call for additional coalition support." A cold silence fell over the chamber. The implications were clear but unspoken. They would sacrifice the Mandari to buy time for themselves. Kethvar felt his light patterns shift to angry red. "You are suggesting we abandon our allies to save ourselves." "I am suggesting we make the choice that ensures Zephyrian survival," Nalseth replied calmly. "The Mandari have 12 populated worlds. If the swarm consumes them, that represents months of processing time. Months we can use to prepare." The vote was called at sunset. 50 crystal beings made their choice in the ancient way, their light patterns shifting to show their decision. 27 voted for withdrawal, 23 voted to honor their alliance. The Mandari worlds would stand alone. That night, Admiral Tovrek received sealed orders from the High Council. the Zephyrian fleets would begin immediate withdrawal from Mandari space. All communications relays between Zephyrian and Mandari territories were to be disabled to prevent the swarm from tracking signals back to Zephyrian space. Tovrek stared at the orders for a long time. He had fought alongside Mandari healers in the Coalition's peacekeeping missions. They had saved the lives of his wounded soldiers with their gentle touch and telepathic healing abilities. Now he was ordered to cut them off from any chance of calling for help. "Sir?" his communications officer asked. "Your orders?" "Execute the withdrawal," Tovrek said quietly. "All fleets return to Zephyrian space immediately. Disable the relay stations as we go." Across 12 star systems, Zephyrian warships powered up their engines and began the journey home. Behind them, automated systems shut down the great communication arrays that had linked the Mandari worlds to the rest of the galaxy for centuries. The Mandari never saw it coming. They woke up to find their skies empty of friendly ships, and their calls for help meeting only silence. High Chancellor Veltara of the Mandari High Council stood in her garden on Serenitus Prime, feeling the collective confusion and fear of her people through their telepathic link. "Chancellor," her aide said, approaching through the flowering trees. "We have lost contact with all Zephyrian forces. The communication relays are not responding." Veltara closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, touching the thoughts of Mandari across the star system. Fear was spreading like wildfire. Their allies had vanished without explanation, and dark rumors were spreading about something terrible moving through the outer rim. "Send ships to investigate the relay stations," Veltara ordered, "and prepare our defense fleet for immediate deployment." But even as she gave the orders, Veltara knew their small fleet of exploration vessels would be no match for whatever was coming. The Mandari had always depended on their allies for protection. They had spent their energy on art, healing, and knowledge instead of weapons. Now they were alone in the dark, and something hungry was heading their way. 3 days later, the first Mandari colony went silent. The orbital stations simply stopped transmitting, as if they had never existed at all. By the end of the week, 6 more worlds had vanished from the communication network. The Void Swarm had found them, and there was nowhere left to run. Serenitus Prime had never been so crowded. Ships arrived every hour, carrying refugees from the outer colonies. They came with stories of darkness falling from the sky, of worlds being stripped bare until nothing remained but empty rock floating in space. High Chancellor Veltara stood on the balcony of the council building, watching another transport ship settle onto the overcrowded landing field below. The vessel was damaged, its hull scored by energy weapons. The refugees stumbling out looked broken in ways that went beyond physical injury. "How many this time?" asked her aide, Corleone. 812, Veltara replied, feeling their pain through the telepathic link that connected all Mandari. Survivors from Altara Colony. They were the only ones who escaped. The mental weight of so much suffering was crushing. Veltara had to keep shields around her mind just to function. Across the planet, healers were working day and night to help refugees cope with trauma unlike anything their peaceful species had ever experienced. "Chancellor," Corleone said softly, "the Defense Council is requesting your presence. Admiral Kethwan has new intelligence about the swarm." Veltara nodded and followed her aide through the corridors of the government complex. The building had been designed for calm contemplation, with flowing curves and gardens at every turn. Now it felt more like a bunker as officials hurried past with worried expressions. The Defense Council chamber was built around a holographic display showing the Mandari star system. Red markers indicated the positions of Void Swarm forces, while blue showed their own defensive fleet. The colors told a grim story. Admiral Kethwan, the highest-ranking military officer in Mandari space, looked exhausted. His usual calm demeanor was cracked with stress. "Chancellor, we have confirmed visual contact with the main swarm fleet. They are 3 days out from Serenitus Prime." The hologram shifted to show the enemy formation, massive organic ships that looked like they had grown rather than been built. Hundreds of them, moving in perfect coordination like a school of predatory fish. "What about our defenses?" Veltara asked. "We have 37 ships," Kethwan replied. "Exploration vessels mostly, with some converted mining platforms. Against a force this size." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the room could see the truth in the display. "Have we heard anything from the Coalition? Any response to our distress calls?" "Nothing, Chancellor. The communication relays are still down. We tried sending courier ships to Zephyrian space, but they have not returned. I believe they were intercepted by swarm scouts." Veltara closed her eyes and felt the fear of 4 billion Mandari across the planet. They were trapped with nowhere to run and no way to call for help. Their allies had abandoned them, and their tiny fleet would last minutes against the approaching swarm. "There is one option," said Defense Coordinator Melthar, speaking for the first time. "Our long-range research vessel, the Far Seeker, has an experimental communication array. It was designed to study signals from deep space. The range is much greater than our standard systems." "Can it reach the Coalition core worlds?" "Possibly. But the power requirements would drain our entire planetary grid. We would have to shut down everything else: hospitals, life support systems, defense shields." Admiral Kethwan looked alarmed. "Chancellor, that would leave us completely defenseless. If the swarm arrives while our systems are down—" "We are already defenseless," Veltara said quietly. "At least this way, someone might know what happened to us." She turned to Melthar. "How long would the transmission take?" 6 hours to charge the array, then the message would propagate across the galaxy over several days. We would send it on multiple frequencies, hoping someone would hear it." Veltara walked to the large window overlooking the capital city. Below, millions of Mandari went about their daily lives, unaware that death was approaching from the void. Children played in parks while their parents worked to accommodate the refugees. Despite everything, they still tried to help each other. "Prepare the Far Seeker," she decided. "We will send out a call for help. If we are going to die, at least we can warn others about what is coming." The next day, power grids across Serenitus Prime went dark. Hospitals switched to emergency power while defense platforms shut down one by one. In the orbital shipyards, the Far Seeker prepared for its final mission. Captain Torvek had volunteered to command the ship during the transmission. It was essentially a suicide mission. Once they began broadcasting, the swarm would detect them immediately and move to eliminate the source. "Array is charged and ready," reported his communications officer. "We have the Chancellor's message loaded into the system." Veltara's voice would carry across the galaxy, telling anyone who listened about the Mandari's fate. She spoke of their peaceful civilization, their dedication to healing and learning, and their betrayal by allies who should have protected them. She asked for someone, anyone, to remember that they had existed. But at the end of the message, she added something more, a plea for help, sent to every known frequency in galactic space. If by some miracle someone could come to their aid, the coordinates of Serenitus Prime would guide them home. "Begin transmission," Torvek ordered. The Far Seeker's experimental array activated, sending the message racing across space at faster-than-light speeds. The signal would bounce off quantum relay points throughout the galaxy, reaching civilizations both known and unknown. 3 hours into the transmission, swarm scouts detected the signal. Dark shapes began moving toward the orbital platform where the Far Seeker waited. Torvek and his crew kept broadcasting until the end, their ship destroyed in a burst of alien fire. But the message was already traveling through space, carried by quantum waves toward distant stars. Most of those who heard it would offer sympathy, but no help. The Mandari were too far away, too isolated, too weak to save. But in a small system near the edge of the galaxy, monitoring stations picked up the signal. A blue world orbiting a yellow star, home to a species that most galactic civilizations considered a myth. The message reached their satellites, was decoded by their computers, and brought to the attention of their military leaders. On Serenitus Prime, Veltara stood in her garden one last time. The swarm would arrive tomorrow, and their small fleet would make its final stand. Through the telepathic link, she felt the courage of Admiral Kethwan and his officers as they prepared to die protecting their world. But she also felt something else, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, somewhere in the vast galaxy, someone had heard their call. Someone who might care enough to help a dying civilization of healers and dreamers. The next morning, dark shapes appeared at the edge of the star system. The void swarm had arrived, and the end of the Mandari was about to begin. Unless, by some impossible chance, help was coming from the unknown depths of space. The Deep Space Monitoring Station on Luna looked like a metal mushroom growing from the gray surface of Earth's moon. Inside its shielded chambers, banks of quantum receivers listened to the endless chatter of galactic civilization. Most of the signals were routine: shipping manifests, news broadcasts, diplomatic communications between distant worlds. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was halfway through her night shift when the emergency alert sounded. The computers had detected something unusual, a high-powered transmission from the Mandari territories sent on multiple frequencies at once. "Chief, you need to hear this," she called to her supervisor. Chief Petty Officer Williams hurried over, coffee still steaming in his hand. "What have you got?" "Kim." "Distress call from somewhere called Serenitus Prime. The computer says it's over 400 light-years from here, but listen to this." The message played in accented but clear galactic standard. Veltara's voice carried across space, telling the story of betrayal and approaching death. She spoke of a peaceful people abandoned by their allies, facing an enemy that devoured entire worlds. Williams set down his coffee, suddenly wide awake. "How long ago was this sent?" "Signal propagation analysis suggests 12 hours. Chief, this is bad. They're talking about something called the Void Swarm that eats planets. If it's real, get Admiral Chen on the line. Priority 1. And start preparing a full intelligence package on everything we've intercepted about this situation." Admiral Sarah Chen was pulled from her bed at 300 hours Earth Standard Time. As the commanding officer of Earth's new deep space fleet, she was used to midnight emergencies. But this was different. By the time she reached the Luna station, her communications team had decoded dozens of related transmissions. "The situation is confirmed," reported Intelligence Officer Rodriguez. "Multiple independent sources reference this void swarm. It's some kind of hive-minded species that strips planets for raw materials. They've been dormant for 1,000 years, but now they're active again." Chen studied the star charts on the main display. The Mandari territories were marked in blue, while red indicators showed the estimated position of the swarm forces. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Latest intercepts suggest over 5,000 vessels, possibly more. They seem to construct new ships from consumed planetary material." "And the Mandari defense capabilities?" "Minimal. They're a peaceful species with no significant military. Their so-called allies withdrew all support when the swarm appeared." Chen felt a familiar anger building in her chest. She had grown up hearing stories of humanity's long struggle to reach the stars. Earth had built its space fleet in secret, using technology stolen or traded from crashed alien vessels. They had watched galactic civilization from the outside, learning about species who considered themselves superior to the primitive humans. "Ma'am," said Communications Officer Park, "we're getting requests for instructions from the Defense Council. They want to know how to respond." Chen stared at the display for a long moment. Earth had no obligations to these aliens. No treaties, no trade agreements, no shared history. They could simply ignore the message and continue preparing their own defenses. But something in Veltara's voice reminded her of the refugee camps she had seen as a child. People abandoned by those who should have protected them, facing death through no fault of their own. "Prepare a briefing package for the Defense Council," she ordered. "I want full tactical analysis, estimated fleet requirements, and risk assessment for Earth security. We meet in 6 hours." The United Earth Defense Council gathered in the underground chambers beneath Geneva. 12 representatives from Earth's major nations, plus the commanding officers of the space fleet. They sat around a circular table while Admiral Chen presented her analysis. "The Mandari are herbivorous telepaths from garden worlds," she explained. "No history of warfare, no significant military capabilities. Their allies abandoned them when this swarm appeared, cutting communication lines to prevent the enemy from tracking signals back to Allied space." "Why should this concern us?" asked Representative Zhang from the Asian Federation. "These aliens are hundreds of light years away. Earth is not threatened." "Actually, we are threatened," Chen replied, highlighting new sections of the star map. "The swarm follows mineral-rich paths through space. Analysis of their movement patterns suggests they'll eventually reach the Sol system, probably within 50 to 70 years. Representative Johnson from the American Union leaned forward. "So we have decades to prepare our defenses. Why risk our forces now?" "Because every world they consume makes them stronger. If we let them devour the Mandari territories, that's 12 planets worth of raw materials converted into more ships, more weapons. Better to face them now while they're still growing." But Chen knew there was another reason, one she couldn't put in a tactical report. Humanity had spent centuries fighting for survival on their dangerous world. They understood what it meant to face extinction with courage. The Mandari's plea for help reminded her of every last stand, every desperate battle where humans had refused to give up. Representative Okafor from the African Federation spoke quietly. "What would you need for this mission?" "The UES determination and her escort fleet, 800 crew members, our best Marines, and enough supplies for a 6-month deployment. The faster we move, the better chance we have of arriving before the Mandari are completely overrun." The debate continued for hours. Earth's space fleet was new and untested. They had only recently managed to build ships capable of faster-than-light travel. Risking their best vessels for unknown aliens seemed like strategic madness. But gradually, the conversation shifted. These weren't just any aliens asking for help. They were healers and teachers who had never hurt anyone. Their own allies had betrayed them out of cold political calculation. If humanity could save them, it would send a message to the galaxy about what Earth stood for. The final vote was close. 7 in favor, 5 against. Earth would intervene. Admiral Chen returned to her flagship with orders to prepare for immediate departure. The UES determination was the pride of Earth's fleet, a heavy cruiser built in the orbital shipyards around Mars. Her escort ships were already taking on supplies and ammunition. "Admiral," her executive officer reported, "we have 800 volunteers for the mission, more than we can accommodate." Chen wasn't surprised. The story of the abandoned Mandari had spread quickly through the fleet. Earth's military had always attracted people who believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "Select the best," she ordered, "and make sure our Marine contingent includes specialists in zero-gravity combat. If we're fighting a hive-mind species, we might need to board their ships." As the determination prepared for launch, messages arrived from across the galaxy. Most alien civilizations offered sympathy for the Mandari, but no aid. A few smaller species promised to remember them after they were gone. The great powers of galactic civilization had already written off the peaceful telepaths as an acceptable loss. 3 days later, the Earth fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward a star system none of them had ever seen. They carried no diplomatic immunity, no coalition authorization, no official standing in galactic politics. They were simply humans doing what they thought was right. The journey would take 2 weeks, long enough for the crew to study everything known about the Void Swarm and practice combat scenarios in the ship's simulators. But mostly, they spent the time wondering what they would find when they arrived. Would the Mandari still be alive? Could Earth's small fleet make any difference against an enemy that devoured planets? Admiral Chen didn't know the answers, but she knew they had to try. Humanity was about to announce itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible by doing what the great civilizations had refused to do. They would stand with the abandoned and fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The Determination and her escorts raced through the void, carrying Earth's first gift to galactic civilization: hope for those who had none. The UES Determination dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Serenitus system and immediately found itself in the middle of a battle. Swarm dreadnoughts were bombarding the planet's orbital defenses while smaller vessels swarmed around the few remaining Mandari ships like predators around wounded prey. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple distress signals," reported Communications Officer Park. "The Mandari defense fleet is down to 12 ships. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display. The enemy force was massive. Over 3,000 vessels of various sizes surrounding Serenitus Prime. The remaining Mandari ships were fighting a desperate delaying action, trying to buy time for civilian transports to escape the planet. "Analysis, Commander Torres?" Her tactical officer shook his head grimly. "The enemy ships are organic construction, ma'am. They appear to grow rather than being manufactured. Hull composition suggests silicon-based armor with regenerative capabilities. Weapons appear to be some kind of plasma projector. Recommended engagement strategy? Honestly, Admiral, our best option might be to evacuate as many civilians as possible and retreat. We're outnumbered 300 to 1. Chen watched a Mandari cruiser explode under concentrated fire from 6 swarm vessels. The organic ships moved like living things, flowing through space in coordinated patterns that seemed almost choreographed. "Captain Santos," she called to her Marine commander, "how quickly can your people prepare for boarding actions?" Captain Maria Santos, a veteran of the Martian colonial wars, raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, are you suggesting we board enemy vessels against a hive mind species?" "I'm asking if it's possible." Santos grinned, showing the kind of smile that had made pirates think twice about raiding Earth merchant ships. "Give me 20 minutes to brief my teams. We'll need cutting tools and void suits rated for extreme environments." The human fleet moved into attack formation. 8 ships against 3,000 should have been suicide. But Earth's vessels had been built by a species that evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them. Human engineering assumed the worst-case scenario and then planned for something even worse. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We are engaging the enemy fleet. Remember, our goal is to buy time for Mandari evacuation, not to destroy every enemy vessel. Target the largest ships first and use our mobility advantage." The Determination opened fire with her main guns, sending streams of superheated tungsten into the nearest swarm dreadnought. The alien ship shuddered under the impact, its organic hull cracking and bleeding atmosphere. The swarm's response was immediate. Hundreds of smaller vessels turned toward the human fleet, moving in perfect coordination. But something was wrong with their attack pattern. They approached like they were hunting frightened prey instead of fighting an equal opponent. "They're not adapting to our tactics," observed Commander Torres. "Their formation assumes we'll try to retreat or defend a fixed position." "Then let's show them how wrong they are," Chen replied. "All ships, implement attack pattern Delta, close to boarding range." The human ships accelerated directly toward the enemy formation. their engines pushing them to speeds that would have liquefied most alien crews. The swarm vessels tried to adjust, but their hive-mind coordination worked against them. They couldn't improvise fast enough to counter human unpredictability. Captain Santos led the first boarding team onto a swarm cruiser, cutting through its organic hull with plasma torches. The interior was a nightmare of wet tunnels and pulsing walls that seemed alive. Bioluminescent creatures scuttled through the passages like antibodies in a bloodstream. "This is like fighting inside something's stomach," reported Sergeant Tommy Okafor over the comm system. "The walls are moving, and I swear I can hear this thing breathing." But the humans adapted quickly. They moved through the alien ship like persistence hunters, never stopping, never showing fear. When swarm defenders blocked a corridor, the Marines found another route. When the ship's immune system tried to seal them off, they cut new passages. The Mandari, watching from their remaining ships, could hardly believe what they were seeing. These humans fought in environments that would kill most species: zero atmosphere, crushing acceleration, radiation levels that fried electronics. They moved through the swarm tunnels like they belonged there. High Chancellor Veltara, coordinating the evacuation from the last functional command ship, felt the human thoughts through her telepathic abilities. It was unlike anything her species had ever encountered. These beings didn't just fight. They calculated constantly, adapted to new situations, and seemed to thrive on the very stress that would paralyze other species. "Chancellor," her aide reported, "the humans are requesting target priorities. They want to know which civilian areas need the most protection." Veltara was amazed. In the middle of this desperate battle, the humans were still thinking about saving lives instead of just winning the fight. "Tell them the southern continents have the largest refugee camps. If they can keep the swarm away from the orbital platforms above those areas." Admiral Chen received the request and immediately redirected her attack. The human ships formed a protective screen around the civilian evacuation zones, their guns blazing away at any swarm vessel that approached. But it was Sergeant Okafor who became the legend that day. When swarm infiltrators broke through the planetary defenses and attacked a refugee shelter, he led 12 Marines into the underground tunnels beneath Serenitus Prime. The facility housed over 50,000 Mandari civilians, including children who had never seen violence before. The swarm creatures were methodically working their way through the complex, dissolving anything organic they encountered. For 18 hours straight, Okafor's team held a choke point in the main tunnel. They took shifts, sleeping in 2-hour intervals, ate combat rations without stopping to rest, and fought with a relentless determination that the swarm couldn't comprehend. The alien creatures were evolved to overwhelm prey through numbers and coordination, but humans were persistence hunters. They could keep going long after other species would have collapsed from exhaustion. Every time the swarm thought they had worn down the defenders, fresh volleys of gunfire would erupt from the human positions. "Sergeant," one of his Marines reported, "ammunition down to 40%. "Then we use our knives," Okafor replied, reloading his rifle for the 100th time. "These things want to hurt civilians. We don't let that happen." Above them, Admiral Chen was implementing a strategy that defied every rule of space combat. She was using gravity itself as a weapon, maneuvering swarm formations into the planet's moon's gravitational field, and then detonating damaged human ships to create debris clouds that shredded organic hulls. "Admiral, the swarm is beginning to retreat," reported Torres with amazement. "I'm reading withdrawal signatures from their command vessels." Chen couldn't believe it either. The Void Swarm had never retreated in recorded history. They consumed prey until nothing remained, then moved on to the next target. But something about fighting humans had disrupted their entire behavioral pattern. The truth was simple but profound. The swarm was evolved to hunt civilizations like the Mandari, peaceful, predictable, easily overwhelmed. Humanity was something they had never encountered, a species more dangerous than themselves. The remaining swarm vessels began pulling back to the edge of the system. Their hive mind was reassessing everything it knew about warfare. These humans fought like the apex predators of a death world, never giving ground, never showing mercy, never stopping until their enemy was destroyed or fleeing. As the immediate threat receded, Veltara sent a message to Admiral Chen. "Human ships, this is High Chancellor Veltara of the Mandari people. Your courage has saved millions of lives. We are forever in your debt." Chen's reply was simple and direct, carrying the weight of humanity's first words to galactic civilization. "Chancellor, you called for help. We came. That's what friends do." In the refugee shelters below, Sergeant Okafor finally allowed his team to rest. They had held their ground for 18 hours against impossible odds. Around them, Mandari families hugged their children and wept with relief. The galaxy had just learned something new about the unknown species from the small blue world. Humanity didn't just survive on their death world. They had brought that strength to the stars, and they had chosen to use it to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. 3 days after the battle, High Chancellor Veltara stood in the ruins of Serenitus Prime's capital city, trying to understand what had happened. The Void Swarm was gone, retreating into deep space for the first time in their recorded history. The humans had saved not just her world, but her entire species from extinction. "Chancellor," her aide Corleone approached carefully, "the human medical teams are requesting permission to help with the wounded in the southern districts." Veltara nodded absently. Since the battle ended, human soldiers had been working alongside Mandari civilians to clear rubble, repair damaged buildings, and provide aid to refugees. It was remarkable to watch. These same warriors who had fought so fiercely were now gentle and patient with frightened children. "What do we know about their species?" she asked. "Our research teams have been studying their biological data," Corleone replied. "Chancellor, the readings are extraordinary. Their bone density is 3 times that of most galactic species. Their muscle mass suggests they evolved under crushing gravity. And their neurological patterns—" "What about them?" "They process stress differently than we do. What would paralyze most beings seems to sharpen their focus instead. Our healers think they evolved as persistence hunters on a world that was actively trying to kill them." Through her telepathic abilities, Veltara had touched the edges of human consciousness during the battle. What she found there both fascinated and frightened her. These beings carried within themselves the potential for startling violence and profound compassion, often at the same time. They could kill without hesitation to protect innocence, then risk their own lives to save a wounded enemy. "They are unlike anything we have encountered," she said quietly. Admiral Chen found Veltara later that day, standing in the memorial garden where the Mandari honored their dead. The human officer moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent years in varying gravity fields, but her eyes held the same exhaustion that Veltara felt. "Chancellor, I wanted to apologize for the damage our weapons caused during the battle. We tried to minimize civilian casualties, but in a fight that size—" "Admiral, you saved 4 billion lives. A few buildings can be rebuilt." Veltara studied the human's face, trying to understand the emotions she sensed there. "But you seem troubled." Chen was quiet for a moment, watching Mandari children play among the flowering trees. "On Earth we have a saying, 'No good deed goes unpunished.' We came here to help, but our presence has changed things. The galaxy knows about humanity now. They'll want to know where we came from, what we want, whether we're a threat." "And are you a threat?" "That depends on who's asking," Chen replied honestly. "We don't want anyone's territory or resources. We just want to live in peace and help people who need it. But we won't let anyone hurt the innocent, and we don't forgive betrayal easily." As if summoned by her words, long-range sensors detected a fleet approaching the system. 40 ships in the crystal formations favored by the Zephyrian Republic, their hulls gleaming with reflected starlight. "This is Admiral Tovrek of the Zephyrian Navy," came the transmission. "We are here to restore order and provide humanitarian assistance to Mandari survivors." Chen's expression hardened. "How convenient. They show up after the fighting is over." The Zephyrian fleet assumed standard orbital positions around Serenitus Prime, as if they belonged there. Admiral Tovrek requested a meeting with both Veltara and the unknown commander of the alien ships that had apparently driven off the Void Swarm. The meeting took place aboard the Determination in Admiral Chen's conference room. Tovrek arrived with a small diplomatic party, his crystalline form shifting through colors that indicated formal politeness. But his attitude changed when he saw the human admiral. "You are not registered in any galactic databases," he said, his light patterns showing suspicion. "What species are you? What gives you authority to operate in Coalition space?" "I'm human," Chen replied simply, "from Earth, and I don't need anyone's authority to help people who are under attack." Tovrek's lights shifted to patronizing yellow. "Earth? That's a myth. A legend about some primitive world that supposedly developed space travel independently. There are no unregistered spacefaring civilizations." "Admiral," Veltara interjected, "I can verify that these humans saved my people when no one else would help. They have earned our trust and gratitude." "Chancellor, with respect, you have been through a traumatic experience. The Zephyrian Republic is prepared to provide proper protection for your people while we investigate this situation. As for these," he gestured dismissively at Chen, "we will need to conduct a full security review before allowing them to operate in Coalition space." Chen stood slowly, her movement carrying the controlled precision of someone who had spent her life in dangerous environments. "Admiral Tovrek, let me make something very clear. Earth doesn't recognize Coalition authority because the Coalition has no moral authority. You abandoned the Mandari when they needed help. You cut their communications and left them to die." Tovrek's lights flashed angry red. "We made a strategic decision based on military necessity." "You made a choice based on cowardice," Chen cut him off. "The Mandari are under Earth's protection now. You can file whatever reports you want with your superiors, but your ships will not establish any orbital presence here without invitation from Chancellor Veltara. You cannot threaten the Zephyrian Republic. We have over 200 ships in this sector, and I have 800 humans who just proved they can defeat impossible odds," Chen replied calmly. "Do you really want to find out what happens when Earth's military decides you're a threat to our friends?" The silence that followed was profound. Tovrek was accustomed to dealing with civilized species who followed diplomatic protocols and respected established hierarchies. These humans seemed to operate by completely different rules. Veltara felt the tension in the room through her telepathic senses. The human admiral was not bluffing. If the Zephyrians tried to force their authority on the Mandari, Chen would fight them with the same relentless determination she had shown against the Void Swarm. "Perhaps," Veltara suggested carefully, "we could discuss long-term arrangements for mutual cooperation. The Zephyrian Republic has many resources that could help with reconstruction efforts, and Earth clearly has capabilities that would benefit everyone." Chen's expression softened slightly. "We're not looking for enemies, Admiral, but we're also not going anywhere. The Mandari asked for help, and we answered. That means something to humans." 6 months later, the first Earth embassy opened on Serenitus Prime. It was a modest building compared to the crystal spires favored by galactic civilizations, but it represented something unprecedented, humanity's first official diplomatic mission to an alien world. The Zephyrian Republic had eventually accepted Earth's presence in Mandari space, though not happily. Other coalition members were still debating what to do about the unauthorized intervention. But the facts were clear. Humanity had accomplished what the great powers of the galaxy had declared impossible. Admiral Chen, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and appointed as Earth's first ambassador to galactic civilization, stood in her office overlooking the rebuilt capital city. Through the windows, she could see human engineers working alongside Mandari architects to design buildings that could withstand future attacks, while maintaining the gentle beauty her hosts preferred. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we're receiving another distress call. A species called the Cathari in the Outer Rim. Their colony worlds are under attack by slavers, and the local authorities are not responding to their calls for help." Chen studied the message on her screen. Another peaceful species abandoned by those who should protect them. Another chance for humanity to make a difference in a galaxy that seemed to value political calculations over moral courage. "Prepare the determination for departure," she ordered, "and send a message to Earth Command. We're going to need more ships." As word of Earth's intervention spread through galactic networks, the message became clear across 1,000 worlds. There was a new power in the galaxy, one that didn't ask for payment or political advantage in exchange for helping others. They called themselves humans. They came from a world that would kill most civilized beings in minutes. And they had chosen to use their terrifying capabilities to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Void Swarm had learned to fear them. The Zephyrian Republic had learned to respect them. And the Mandari had learned that sometimes salvation came from the most unlikely places. In her garden on Serenitus Prime, Veltara watched human children playing with Mandari youngsters, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The two species were different in almost every way, but they shared something important, the belief that helping others was worth any risk. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had brought something new to the stars, not just strength, but the will to use that strength for others. And for those who had been abandoned and forgotten, that made all the difference.